TheBeat.
And welcome to another episode of the Beat Podcast. I'm MJ, here with
BD.
as usual. Now, this is actually our playoff special. So there's definitely a lot of great topics to talk about this time of the year, and a lot of interesting stuff is happening. But really, before we get into the nuts and bolts of the playoffs, MVP candidates, and break down some of the matchups in the first round, I think it's only fit that we honor Lauren Hill. She is a hero from Mount St. Joseph basketball, actually right around the area where me and BD are from. And, of course, she just passed away recently from brain cancer. So we both definitely, our condolences go out to her family and friends. And she raised a lot of money and awareness for that and carried herself in a dignified manner. Looked at it optimistically as how she could help others. So just wanted to honor her and what she's done through sports, transcending sports to help people with cancer and brain cancer. And
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. Sometimes when you wouldn't think that sports can have a super positive effect when it comes to research and medicine, but it's always good when you can use sports to raise awareness and money to help everyone in that type of situation. And one of the things that she said was that she knew that raising the money and awareness won't help her necessarily, but it will help people down the road in the future. So that was very big of her and definitely good for others as well.
that's a great point, BD. So anyway, before we get into our playoff special here, I just could not mention March Madness. Being from the Cincinnati area, you all might not know, but a lot of great basketball teams, UC, Xavier, U of L, UK, they're all close. Of course, the Cincinnati teams are 20 minutes away, depending on where you're from. And then you got other teams an hour 20 minutes away. So there's just a lot of crazy Kentucky fans, especially across the river right there in northern Kentucky. And you got to get your hats off to Kentucky. It's really hard to go undefeated. A lot of talent on the team that they're going to lose to the NBA. But Kentucky had a good run. We're disappointed. Kentucky fans typically don't like Duke, so that sort of jabbed us in a little bit of heart there too. But it was a good run.
It would have been really cool if they had went 40-0.
Wow, that would have been amazing.
Yeah.
That would have been amazing. Yeah, I guess we'll have to wait for next year when Calipari recruits all the best players again, like he does every year.
Right.
So yeah, just threw that in there. But all right, it is NBA playoff time.
Best basketball.
Hell yeah, this is the best basketball you can watch.
Definitely. Yeah, I always liked this time of the year. I remember even when I was starting to watch basketball on a more regular basis, late 90s, early 2000s. It was always a fun time because you get to watch the best from everyone, because it's true, like, if you don't win, definitely you get knocked out, go home.
Win or go home.
Yeah, or going fishing like the TNT crew always has.
Photoshop you on a boat.
That's right.
There's just a lot of great matchups in the East and West. I guess you can lead us off, BD, which matchup we can talk about.
Yes, I guess we can start with the Eastern Conference. That one doesn't have as many interesting matchups in the first round.
Uh-huh.
I think the West is it's more stacked.
Definitely.
A lot more competition there, so each of those series will be much more competitive. So we're going to, just the basics on who we think is going to win in each series, and to move on to the next round, and how many games it'll take the team to win in. And we'll start with the East, and then we'll move on to the West. We'll go with the 1 versus 8 and work our way down to 2 versus 7, 3 versus 6, 4 versus 5.
Sweet.
So I guess I'll go first. My pick with the Hawks versus the Nets. I think this one should be pretty easy for the Hawks to win, in my opinion. I think the Nets will put up a good fight, but they were 4-0 against the Nets this season, and they have obviously a much better regular season record, which always can kind of give you a good indication on how reliable the team is in how well they can play together and win close games. And so I think the Hawks will win that one in 4, maybe 5. I don't see why the Nets couldn't win 1, maybe 2, but I'd say the Hawks in 4 or 5.
I'm with you, BD. Atlanta, they might not have that true superstar, but they have a lot of talent, and they play great team ball. And Brooklyn, Paul Pierce actually made some choice comments about players on that team, specifically Darren Williams, and maybe not having the motivation to be the great player he could be. And that's Paul Pierce's words, not mine. Of course, I paraphrased it, but I'll give Brooklyn 1 game, but Atlanta's played well all season. They've kept it up, even with the rise of the Cavs and the Bulls getting a little bit better there. Atlanta's got game.
Yeah, and sometimes, or more than just sometimes, a lot of the time, when you have 3 or 4 really good players, you don't have to have a true superstar. Sometimes if you have 3 or 4 good players that can play good team ball, that means more in the playoffs than really anything else. That's what made the Spurs so successful, even last year too, because they have great superstars. Don't get me wrong, but not like a LeBron. But team ball was able to overcome even Dwayne Wade and LeBron James.
Yeah, you look at the Spurs. Obviously, there's tons of talent, but they're older and they got to survive injuries and stuff like that. And the young guys on the team really stepped it up and made the game easier on them. And Miami's always been touted as the superstar team before LeBron left, but the cohesive style of the Spurs really shined through. I agree with you.
Yeah, so I think that's what makes the Hawks such a good team and a dangerous team, and why they can go very far in the playoffs and possibly make it to the finals this year.
Definitely.
All right, so the next are the Cavs.
Go Cavs.
Versus Boston, and I think same thing here. I think this one maybe is going to be probably the quickest series, because Cleveland is playing really good right now, and so is Boston. The last 15 games or so, they've played really, really well. But I think LeBron wants another ring, and he needs one if he wants to be considered one of the greatest of all time.
Oh yeah.
Which I'm sure that's his motivation now. He's definitely playing well this season, but he wants to get another championship. And then the other two, Kevin Love and Kyrie Irving, and then the new additions. This is a really good team, and I think they could probably win this one in 4, maybe 5, but I'll say for sure they'll win this in 4 against Boston.
Cleveland, they went from an okay team to a great team. It's pretty amazing. And I think the key is their selflessness. They're each person, and sometimes it has a lot to do with personalities on a team, but it seems like each person on that team has been able to play selfless basketball, starting with LeBron, and Boston Celtics can kiss their butt goodbye.
Yeah, and they also have different positions that they're covered. It's Kevin Love, you have JR, who's a great shooter, J.R. Smith, and Kyrie Irving, point guard, LeBron, small forward. So it's not like they're just top heavy with a bunch of bigs or just a bunch of guards. They have a lot of their bases covered. Kind of like, well, in a way, kind of like Miami, right?
Yeah.
But this is maybe a little bit more spread out. They're not all just tall or small guys. So I think that helps them out, in my opinion.
I completely agree. Not every team has, even the Miami Heat when they were good, their weakness would have probably been their inside.
Yeah, because it was just Chris Bosh.
Exactly.
He's not that big.
And Chris Bosh, he really isn't, even though he's a power forward, he actually plays more on the perimeter.
Right.
More of a 15-foot jump shot, drive to the basket guy. So, this Cleveland team's, they got Kendrick Perkins coming off the bench.
That's big too, definitely.
They're pretty balanced.
Yeah, that makes them a lot better, or lot more dangerous when they play against other teams that have bigger guys. Like, say they made it to finals and they played a team like, again, the Spurs, or let's say Memphis. Memphis has a lot of big guys.
Yeah.
Having a guy like Kendrick Perkins play alongside Kevin Love, that's, I'm not saying that's the finals matchup, but if it was, having Kendrick Perkins on there would definitely help them.
Oh, yeah.
All right, so the next are the Bulls versus the Bucks, and this is probably going to be a very interesting matchup.
Yeah.
I'd say, let's see, a season series, they were 3-1 against the Bucks. Bulls were, and both of their games, and they were 2-0 in Chicago, so that's, I think, a little more important in the playoffs because they have the home court advantage. But I mean, I would think it could possibly be an upset, but I think Chicago will win it. Maybe, in my opinion, 5 or 6 games, depending on how well Milwaukee plays and how limited Derrick Rose is. But I think the Bulls have played well even without him playing on the court. So this one for me, Bulls in 5 or 6.
Yeah, BD is more of the numbers guy, and I'm, I guess, not the numbers guy. I'm an English major, so he's more of an expert on that part. But yeah, I'm definitely think Chicago will win it. Some of these teams, though, like BD is saying, they're under the radar and they win a lot of games against a certain team in the regular season. They might have their number. They're just that. It's just like there's sometimes there's that one team that is just good against another team. And it seems as though Milwaukee does that against Chicago, so should make for an interesting matchup.
Sure. And then the last 2 teams in the East, the Wizards versus the Raptors. This one to me is the most interesting first round matchup, and where if I'm going to pick an upset, it'll be here. So for me, I'm thinking it's going to be a close one. It's going to go to either 6 or 7 games, no matter who wins. But there's always an upset. I think in this one I've picked the Wizards over the Raptors, even though the Raptors did beat the Wizards. I think they're 3-0 against them this season. The Raptors are against the Wizards, so don't really have a good reason. There's just something about Paul Pierce and John Wall. I think John Wall is a really good up-and-coming superstar. And
definitely.
If you look at their regular season record, they're very close. They're only within 3 games of each other, so it's not like one team has won a lot more games than the other one. So for me, in this one, I'd say Wizards in 6 or 7.
This is probably, at least on paper, is the most exciting matchup of the first round. They're the most evenly matched teams
in the East.
In the East, for sure. To be honest with you, really after Washington, most of those teams, nobody really expects much from in the playoffs.
Right.
But I'll be devil's advocate and go with Toronto. But I mean, it's really close.
Yeah, you could go either way there. Definitely, yeah, that's a tough one. Yeah, it is like MJ said, it's the most exciting first round matchup in the East. The West is a totally different story. I think we'll move on. We'll move on to the West. So here, the only obvious, in my opinion, first round winner is the Warriors versus the Pelicans.
Yeah.
I picked them to win 4, maybe 5, because the Pelicans are, they're a pretty good team, but Warriors, I think, are just amazing this year. And then all the other matchups, I think, are going to go really deep, 6 or 7 games, and it can be, anybody. So for me, first pick is Warriors in 4, possibly 5, but I picked them in 4.
The New Orleans Pelicans, they've been playing great.
Mm-hmm.
Anthony Davis was sort of like a dark horse MVP candidate, and it's really great to have these Kentucky guys, him and John Wall, be elite players in the NBA.
Sure.
But, I mean, it could happen. I don't think they'll even win a game against the Golden State Warriors.
Yeah, but sometimes, those upsets happen, because, remember, I mean, it was a few years ago, but I think when Dallas, they had a similar record, they were like 67 and 15, and I think it was after maybe in like the 2007 season, but one of those times they were the number 1 seed, and back when the Warriors had Baron Davis, they upset the Mavs.
Oh, yeah.
So it can always happen.
Definitely.
I think it also happened a few years ago to the Spurs. They were the number 1 seed. They got knocked out of the first round by the number 8 seed. It's very rare. I think maybe those were the only 2 times that it ever happened. But it could happen. But I don't see it.
Yeah.
This Golden State team is very good.
BD's right. I mean, there's always that possibility, and you never know. I really like Golden State.
Mm-hmm.
Stephen Curry, Steve Kerr. I just watched this little segment they had on ESPN last night, and it was really cool. It talked about Steve Kerr and Stephen Curry's relationship, and they have after every practice they have like a free throw shooting contest, and it's really cool. They like go golfing together, and Steve Kerr said that everybody is willing to take their role on that team. So I think they got something really special going there.
Sure, that's good. It's always important.
Yeah.
So number 2 versus 7 matchups, and this one is another, I think, very interesting one, is the Rockets versus the Mavericks. And, I mean, both teams are really good and really stacked. I know that it's been like this for a while now in the West, but most of these teams are within a few games of each other, really.
Yeah.
I mean, now Houston and Dallas, there's a 6-game difference, but still, they're both really good teams. I think this will go to probably like 6 or 7 games, most likely. You can go either way. I mean, when it goes, say, the Rockets are a little bit better since they've been a little more consistent, you can go with them. But you could also say, I mean, a Dallas upset is definitely possible. I don't know. I guess I'll go with, because Mavericks were so good last year, they were the only team really to give the Spurs trouble last year and take them to 7 games in the first round. Other than that, they've obviously, they've gotten Rondo, so they've gotten better this year, and Dirk is healthier. So I'll go for the upset here and say Mavericks in 7 games, but really it could go either way. But I'll be a little bit more bold and go with Mavericks taking the upset over the Rockets.
I'm actually going to agree with BD on this one. I've always been a believer in the Mavericks. Mark Cuban, a few years ago, was trying to rely on the free agent market. Didn't really work out with them. It happened right after their first championship, and only championship. But he's done a good job to bring back talent and to put that team in position to be a champion.
Mm-hmm.
They've added key pieces back from their championship team. J.J. Barea, Tyson Chandler. They brought in Chandler Parsons, Rajon Rondo, and Amari Stoudemire. So for me, they've actually been underachieving because there's just so much talent on that team.
Yeah, and I think that's important in the playoffs. To me, I guess the big difference is that they're deeper. So even though Dirk isn't what he was back when they won their championship back in 2011, he's not as good because he's older, and that's understandable. Same for Duncan and Kobe, right? They're not the same guys they were 4 or 5 years ago either, but they're deeper, and he doesn't have to do as much, whereas Houston has to rely a lot more on James Harden and Dwight Howard.
Definitely.
And we know that Dwight Howard's a liability at the end of the game when he has to shoot free throws, and I know a lot of times when he played Orlando, you put him in tough spots. Sometimes he'll get into foul trouble. I wouldn't say he'll choke, but maybe underperforms a little bit sometimes. And there have been games where you put him in a tough situation and he does an amazing job. But I just feel that in a 4-game to 7-game series, I think it's better to have a deeper team. And with the addition of Rondo and Chandler, and I kind of forgot Stoudemire too. But I mean that to me is. It's going to make the Mavericks a really tough team to beat.
Houston has done a great job this year, especially with what they had.
Mm-hmm.
Dwight Howard's been injured a big chunk of the season. Mm-hmm. They did a good job of actually getting rid of Jeremy Lin and Chandler Parsons. I like both those players, but one of their big knocks from last year was their weakness at defense on the perimeter.
Mm-hmm.
So they got some guys that are, I would say, better at defensive players than those guys.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes, playoffs is so much about that.
Mm-hmm.
And
defense.
And defense. And James Harden has to carry a lot of the load.
That'd be tough against a team this stacked.
And the thing is, like you said, I like Dwight Howard, but I mean, there's pretty much legit things you can say about him maybe not performing as well as he should. And what I mean specifically by that is I remember it might have been a year or two ago, but it's almost like he intentionally tries to foul out instead of keep playing when they're losing. And, you just can't do that.
Yeah, maybe he gets frustrated and makes the wrong decision and gets into foul trouble. But yeah, should be a very fun matchup and definitely can go either way. I just think that the depth that the Mavericks have is an advantage in playoffs.
And another thing is, when you have a team with as much talent as the Dallas Mavericks, it's not been a smooth season for them.
Right.
But these are not young players. Like, their stars are either more in the middle of their career or more at the end of their career.
Mm-hmm.
So they're more likely to be able to overcome struggles than a younger team.
Sure, that's true. And I did want to mention one thing that I just looked this up recently. The Rockets are 3-1 versus the Mavericks this season, and they're 2-0 in Houston. So, which might be important since obviously they are playing. Houston has the home court advantage, but that doesn't always mean that team that does better in the regular season always wins in the playoffs. There have been plenty of times where a team might be 4-0 in the regular season and then loses pretty badly in the playoffs.
Yeah.
But at least something to we have a good idea of how they played against each other in the regular season. So this is a big one. Obviously, the defending champs, who on that last night of the season when they lost to the Pelicans and Memphis won, they dropped from the number 2 seed to the number 6 seed, which really hurt. It's going to make their playoff hopes but repeating a lot more difficult for them because now they have to play. Basically, they don't have home court advantage at all unless, let's say the Mavericks win, which is what we predicted. But, it's going to definitely make things tougher for them. And they are playing a great Clippers team instead of they were the number 2 seed playing. Well, I guess they'd be playing Dallas. But anyways, all the teams in the West are good anyways. But I think that the Spurs versus Clippers, it's going to be another 7-game series. Very tough. I think most of the games will be decided. They'll be close. Maybe there'll be one blowout. But I think that's going to be one of those series where it's either going to be the Spurs are going to pull together and they'll make one really good last-ditch effort to win another title and they'll start things off here, or the teams like the Clippers, Memphis, Golden State that have been beaten by the Spurs these last few years will knock them out eventually. And so it could either be the Clippers saying, this is our time now. We've played really good this season. We have a little bit of better record than you. We have home court advantage. We won last year. Now it's our turn, and they'll win. Or the Spurs will say, no, we still got a little bit more left in the tank. We have at least one more left in the tank. So, and that's what I think, at least in the first round, as good as the Clippers have been, and they're 2-2 versus the Spurs this season, and they've each won both a home and an away game. But I think another upset, I think the Spurs, since they know that, the Tim Duncan era is coming to an end, they'll do everything they can to try to get him at least in position to maybe win one more ring. So I'll pick the Spurs over the Clippers, so maybe one more if you want to call it an upset. You can, if not, I'll definitely go with the Spurs in 7 games, a close 7 games. It's going to be a tough, hard-fought series. Maybe even closer than the Rockets versus Mavericks series.
It's getting to an end of the road for the Spurs.
That's what a lot of people say though, every year about them.
They say that every year. I heard, actually, the other day, Manu Ginobili said he was going to retire. I think it was after 2016. So I think that puts him at one more season after this. I definitely am going with the Spurs. I actually think they'll dominate a little bit more.
Okay.
I mean, I've never been a huge Clippers guy. They've got tons of talent. DeAndre Jordan.
Chris Paul is playing amazing.
Chris Paul's amazing. You know, I would love to see Kobe join that team. Then I would pick them over the Spurs maybe, but I don't know. I'm a believer in the Spurs. This year they're an older team, so a lot of times they'll have injuries. This year, a lot of their young guys have been injured, so I think that'll add much needed depth that they didn't have in the course of the season. But I'm going with Spurs.
Yeah, and the other cool thing about this matchup is you get the two best coaches.
Oh yeah.
Definitely Greg Popovich
amazing.
is the best, but I think Clippers have an amazing coach as well.
Yeah, Doc Rivers is awesome. He's an awesome coach.
Sure. So it'll be interesting to see how they begin the series, and then whoever wins game one, how the other coach adjusts.
Yeah.
Because that was another exciting thing to watch when the Lakers played the Celtics a few years ago in the finals back in 2010.
Yeah.
How Phil Jackson and Doc, that was pretty fun to watch them, coaching and how they could adjust.
Yeah.
Really, I think the only game that wasn't close was Game 6. Game 1, I think, it was a pretty close one too, but they adjusted. It's going to be interesting to see how these two basketball geniuses.
That's a great angle. I never looked at it at. Yeah, I mean, you have two great coaches going against each other, so you know that they're going to make the proper adjustments at game after game. So it'll be fun.
Yeah, and we'll see how, because the Clippers are a younger team, and, Chris Paul, Blake Griffin, they want their shot. So we'll see if this will be, if the Spurs make it to the finals, this will be their third year in a row, and their stars are older. So we'll see if, these younger guys can right off the bat take advantage of that. Because we were talking about this the other day usually the Spurs get off to a good start in the regular season and they rest their players a lot.
Yeah.
But this year, because they didn't really play great in the beginning, and even after the All-Star break, they had that 4-game losing streak. It hurt them. So they had to play superstars a lot more games, more minutes, and pretty much until the end of the season, just so they could try to position themselves so they, for a better seed. And it didn't work out for them. I guess in the end they were still the number 6 seed, but that might be an important factor. Maybe not as much in the first round, but later on, or it could be. We'll see. It's because they usually, think Popovich likes to rest Duncan and Parker and Ginobili, shut them down a few games before the last, before the season ends. But I don't think he had that luxury this year. We'll see. That's going to be, this is definitely going to be my favorite first round matchup.
Yeah, that was really painful for me the last day of the regular season when the Spurs dropped so far, but every team's tough in the West, so except for the Pelicans.
Yeah, but they're a good team. I mean, and to be honest though, I think the Spurs played, because they played them. The Spurs played the Pelicans the last game of the season. They were opponents of each other, and Duncan and all the guys played, and Pelicans were still able to beat them. And we know that the Spurs wanted to win that game, because if they did, they would have probably had it for sure a higher seed.
Yeah.
So that was pretty. We don't want to mock the Pelicans too much. That was a big win for them.
That's a good point.
So, I think the next and the final matchups, the Memphis Grizzlies versus Portland, and this is probably in my opinion, after the Golden State New Orleans matchup, this is probably another one where Memphis, I think they'll win it. It's not going to be easy for them, but I'd say they win it in 6 games. I could go to a game 7, but I'd say they'll probably win in 6. And I say that because even though they're 5 seed, they really have a better record. They have a lot of big guys, Marc Gasol and Zach Randolph. They're a pretty deep team also. I was kind of surprised that they weren't, record-wise, they weren't a little bit better. I was surprised that they didn't get to 60 wins and get the number 2 spot. But in my opinion, they're probably, after Golden State, the second best team in the West. Now, I know they had a lot of injuries this season, but just because they have so many big guys and they're also very deep, I feel like they're definitely a team that can go very far this year. And I'm picking them in 6 games.
You know, we're not doing this on purpose, but I think we've only disagreed on one matchup. That was in the Eastern Conference. I mean, yeah, I'm a big believer in the Grizzlies because they say the playoffs is about matchups. Portland's got a great team, but, you know, LaMarcus Aldridge is the big guy for Portland. And then Memphis has Marcus Saul and Zach Randolph. I just think that Memphis is a little bit deeper. I think they have a chance to be a great team. Obviously, this matchup will show it. If they dominate, then it sort of shows that maybe Memphis is becoming a great team.
And they are 4-0 against the Blazers this year, so
wow,
that's something, I guess, to take into account also.
Yeah. Yeah, just, you know, it's funny because Adam Silver picked DeMarcus Cousins to play on the All-Star team instead of Damian Lillard, which I didn't agree with because I reward winning, and Portland Suns does a great job. And I know what DeMarcus Cousins is doing. He's got some amazing numbers, but that's a good team. But I just do not see them getting past Memphis.
Yeah, Memphis is just, they play, I think, tough physical defense. And that's probably one of the best things you can do. That and team ball are two of the best things you can do playoffs.
Marcus Saul won Defensive Player of the Year.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
I think it was last year. I mean, they're really a team defense, and when you have two guys that are nearly 7 feet tall, that's tough to score on. Get easy baskets.
Sure. Well, so those were our picks for both conferences, and I guess next time we'll try to do one next week since it's the playoffs. But then we'll have each team will have played at least maybe 3 games, and we'll have a good idea of what we thought, and obviously if we were completely wrong, we'll adjust our...
Yeah, then we'll change sides real quick.
Yeah, we'll adjust what we thought and maybe talk about...
Jump on the bandwagon of somebody else.
Yeah, we'll talk more about that, who we think will, let's say, two different teams are 3-1 or 3-0, and you can kind of see the matchups. We'll talk about possibility of, say, Clippers playing whoever their opponent will be if they're dominating San Antonio, which most likely won't happen. But we'll talk about things like that. Hopefully, some cool plays and things from the first round.
Yes, sir. So it's also that time of the year when we start finding out things like the MVP, Defensive Player of the Year, Sixth Man, all that good stuff. They do the voting, and that'll all be in soon. So we're not going to break down every category, but before they officially announce it, we have our own, or who we think is the MVP this year. I think we both think it's down to James Harden and Stephen Curry. For me personally, Stephen Curry. You know, last podcast, I said, you know, after the few weeks remaining in the season, we'll start to get a clearer picture, and really we haven't. They've both been playing phenomenal. I would reward Stephen Curry. They've both done historic things, at least for their personal careers. And, of course, Houston actually finished number 2 in the West, but he's on the best team. He's the best player on the best team, at least going by regular season, and both guys are phenomenal, but Stephen Curry for me.
Yeah, I agree. I think he broke his own record and the all-time record for most threes in a regular season.
That is amazing.
So now he holds the 1 and 2, and I think 4, something like that. He's like 1, 2, and 4 all time in regular for a single season record.
Yeah, I mean, I called him a video game machine previously, and he pretty much is. I mean, he's so amazing at three-pointers, he's breaking his own record and not other people's.
Yeah.
It's phenomenal. It's phenomenal to make that many threes in a season. They just do a great team effort. For this podcast, we're doing more of a mini hot topics. There's the big chunk of the news has been, of course, the playoffs, but I just have to say, I was really disappointed the Pacers didn't make it in. They got Paul George back late in the season. They had to fight so hard their second to last game of the season to get that win against Washington Wizards. It was like double overtime before they eventually won. the last game of this season, they were outmatched by the Memphis Grizzlies, and they either needed a net loss or they had to win that game to make it in the playoffs. And unfortunately, neither one of those things happened, but I was, I was a little bit disappointed there.
But it didn't really matter to me who it was. Atlanta was going to destroy them in the first round anyways. But yeah, it's always tough when you work hard to try to make it in. But like just what, last year, the year before, they were competing against Miami to go to the finals. So I don't know what happened. I mean, other than injuries, but just kind of definitely, it's a shame that such a good team a year or so ago gave Miami some trouble. Playoffs, deep in the playoffs, now wasn't able to even make it in this year. But
yeah,
that's how sports work sometimes,
right? That's how the story goes. I mean, they tried to make some moves to make them better, and I'm not really sure if it worked out or not. And Lance Stevenson went for more money, and then Paul George got injured, but they'll probably be back next year.
Yeah, we'll see.
So another thing I wanted to mention was just the Los Angeles Lakers. It's like the worst. BD would know this for sure. It's like the worst record in franchise history.
I think it's their worst season ever. Yeah, took them 60-something years, but even the Lakers had one. I think this isn't even the first time ever that they missed the playoffs 2 years in a row. But I don't know for sure. But wow. I think it is. Yeah, they're pretty bad time for the Lakers.
I really feel bad for Kobe because he's such a good talent and he's so loyal to that team, and I'm sure he would have helped them get some more wins just by carrying the team, but it's just rough, especially when you get in the twilight of your career and you're on a team where you got to carry the load.
Well, we'll see what happens. I mean, they'll definitely get a high pick, and they have, I think, a lot of money, good players. So if they get a good, like a first or second pick, even like in the top three, and a superstar, they have, I think, a pretty young team. So maybe they'll probably improve a lot by next season. I don't know if they'll be. Obviously, they won't be championship contenders, but if you never know with the Lakers what they can do.
I agree. I just think it's funny because just keeping it honest here, this was my opportunity to rant on Jim Buss. He's just done a horrible job to me.
Yeah.
Let me make that clear. But I just feel like if I was going to give him a grade, it'd probably be a D or an F. Now he did get Nash and Dwight Howard in his time at the top, but he also lost Nash and Dwight Howard in his time in the top. I just feel like he's made poor decisions. The first, oh man, I'm going on a rant now, but when Phil Jackson retired, they could have got Brian Shaw, who knew the triangle, was a great coach. Instead, they brought in, it was Mike Brown, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And, you can argue that. Some people would say not a big deal. I thought it was a poor move. And then, of course, they get Dwight Howard, who, in retrospect, probably didn't really want to go there. But at the time, because of which team had enough cap space or whatever to afford Dwight Howard, that was the only good team that could really get him. And I think what really hurt him more than anything was that they had an opportunity to hire Phil Jackson as the head coach. According to Phil Jackson, they gave him the weekend to think it over. And they were going to give Phil Jackson till Monday to make his decision. And then he gets called or text or whatever Sunday night, and they tell him that they're hiring Mike D'Antoni. It's hard to see any real logic in that. And to me, it's just like, okay, Phil Jackson's the greatest coach. Dwight Howard, they interview these guys at the games all the time, and he actually made a comment saying he would love to play for Phil Jackson. So, the reason I would give him an F is because the only reason I wouldn't give him an F is because he brought in Dwight Howard and Steve Nash. But if he would have, Dwight Howard would have probably stayed, or at least been a lot more likely to stay with Phil Jackson. And, he's been heavily criticized by Magic Johnson, who says in a nutshell, that maybe, he's not really a basketball mind and he's sort of trying to do it himself or everything. But I don't know. I think Kobe should, I feel like Jim Buss has done a disservice to Kobe, who's been loyal to that franchise and really not put them in the best position to win.
Gave him a lot of money, though.
He did pay him a lot, so at least Kobe's looking good losing. You know that. But, man, if I was Kobe, because they always find a way out of these contracts. I don't really know the complications of how it works, but, I mean, stay in L.A. and join the Clippers, man. That's what I say. But that's just my rant, so I don't know,
Yeah, I don't have too much to say there, really. We'll see what happens, I guess, this off season, what they can do. That's I think one of the advantages that a lot of these big franchises have is when you're in a big city like New York or LA, you can always attract players who want to live in those cities.
Definitely.
So it's not difficult to persuade superstars and good players, especially if you can say, look, we have a lot of cap space, so we can pay you, and we can get maybe another superstar or a few other key players, so that you can entice them to come. And they can get, the 1, 2, or 3 pick. They can get another good young player. So we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, Jim Buss can turn it around, and I think I'm just frustrated because I felt like they were so close to being a great team. I just felt like decisions were made that were not in the best interest. But I mean, BD's absolutely right. They've got a great future. They got a lot of cap space. They actually have a lot of talent. Julius Randle was injured. When he comes back,
unfortunate, yeah.
He's an awesome player. When he comes back, they're going to be good. So
he's going to play. We'll see about the Lakers. He'll definitely hopefully he'll play well. But
so I don't mean to be down on the Lakers because they got a bright future. I'm just frustrated because I just really wanted to see Nash win that MVP, or not MVP, but get his trophy. And yeah,
not going to happen for him, unfortunately, but.
Maybe you can become a coach or assistant coach and get one that way.
Maybe.
I just wanted to make some notes about our previous podcast. I used the word trade like a million times, but there were different circumstances. Sometimes it was free agency. Specifically, I'm talking about when I mentioned Lance Stevenson. And I do know it wasn't a trade, but apparently that was the word of the day for me. Yeah, man. Anything you want to throw out there?
That's it. We'll try to. Well, I guess maybe, like I said, for next time we'll talk about what's happened in the first round and possibly matchups for the second round. Maybe we can talk about the playoff format. We talked a little bit about it amongst ourselves.
Yeah.
How it can be improved, because I think we had how many teams in the East that were well below 500. 2 teams that were below 500 make it in, and Milwaukee was at 500. And then in the West, we had, unfortunately, Oklahoma City and Russell Westbrook. That was, I guess, another thing we should have mentioned. He was amazing this year, carrying it, because both he and Durant were injured, but Durant had even more severe injuries, and Russell Westbrook, I think, did everything he could to try to get that team into the playoffs. Unfortunately, they didn't make it, even though they did have the same record as New Orleans. We try to maybe discuss how the playoff format could be improved so that we wouldn't have teams below 500 making it in, or maybe put any comments or suggestions. We'll look into it.
Yeah.
Maybe that as well. So that's, I guess, something we could talk about next time.
Yeah, I think BD brings up a really good point. It happens almost every year in the NBA, and
especially in the East.
And I'm not really sure, because you would think that over a period of time, just by the draft is technically fair to a certain degree. You would think that eventually it would be balanced, or the East would be better at one point in time, but for some reason they never are.
Yeah. And you always have really just like 2 or 3 good teams that are legitimate title contenders. And then the other 4 or 5 teams, just nothing. They're really like the best they could hope for is the first round win. That's it.
I'm just being generous here, because usually it's even lower than this, but at least the 8th seed who make it in the playoffs in the Eastern Conference is usually not very good, at least compared to the teams that are making the playoffs in the West.
Right.
Or not making the playoffs because they can't get to that 8th spot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because it's really unfortunate. It's like Kevin Love actually never made it to the playoffs before the Cavs, and he wasn't on bad teams. It was just because they were in the Western Conference, and that hurt him.
So if you have any suggestions or comments about it, let us know. We'll look at them.
So that'll be really interesting. Oh, by the way, BD, Did you check that Spurs playoff song?
Not yet. I'm going to later today.
Yeah, so they got this Spurs playoff song, and it's by Spiran. Obviously Duran Duran. I think it's hilarious, man. It's like this 80s thing, and it's like Patty Mills and Matt Bonner. The big three aren't in it. Man, you gotta check that out. I'm actually gonna use that for our outro music this episode, so they get a taste of greatness. Alright, so that ends our playoff special, and then obviously we'll have more to say about the second round, and see what happens in the first round, if there's any surprises or disappointments.
Hopefully no injuries.
Hopefully no injuries, yeah, exactly. So yeah, catch us next time, and we're definitely going to check out some amazing games and give you some of our insight, and go Cavs.